Greetings and welcome everyone to our Wednesday Witness. We're going to get started in the next few minutes. Good to see some of you. Welcome Gezu, all the way from Ethiopia. Really glad that you are joining us virtually today. And yeah, please follow Susan. Please introduce yourselves in the chat, your name, your location. Also want to shout out Donna, a veteran of Church and Society. I'm glad that you're in the space. Diane, Peace with Justice Coordinator of the Baltimore, Washington Annual Conference. If I know you, I'm going to call you out. That's just who I am. So very, very grateful. Aloha from Honolulu. Yes, welcome everyone. Welcome. Go ahead, drop your name, your location in the chat. We're going to get started shortly. Happy Wednesday to you too, Melanie. Again, if you're just joining us, go ahead, drop your name, your location in the chat. We'll get started in a few minutes. Welcome. Again, welcome to those who are just joining us. Please introduce yourselves in the chat, your name, your location. We're going to get started in the next minute. Welcome. So greetings everyone and welcome back to our Wednesday Witness. Today we'll be talking about advocating for peace with justice with my incredible colleague, Holly Metcalf, the Director of Peace with Justice. I am the Reverend Laura Kigweba James. I serve as the Director of Grassroots Organizing at the General Board of Church and Society in the United Methodist Church. So the Wednesday Witness series began last year. And it was designed to be the short, no more than 30-minute session. We're going to try to make it 30 minutes today, hopefully, really to highlight current issues that we're working on at Church and Society and to equip you as United Methodists who are on the ground, to take action to create change in your local communities. So all of these sessions are recorded and will be available for later viewing that you can share maybe during Sunday school, or if you just want to watch later or share within your community, we encourage you to do that, but it will be recorded. This is being recorded and will be available a little bit later. So we encourage you during this time to listen, share your questions either in the chat or the Q&A box. For those of you who are joining us on Facebook, hello. You can also drop your questions in the comment section. So we welcome you all. And if we have time, we're going to try to answer as many questions as possible. But if you have further questions about this series or any of the content that is shared today, please email us at gbcs@umcjustice.org. That is gbcs@umcjustice.org, or just visit our website and join our Church and Society network at umcjustice.org. It's just that simple. So as United Methodists, we affirm and believe that national budgets are moral documents. They're a testament to national priorities. And may it be that budgets invest in life-giving and life-sustaining priorities, indeed the things that make for peace. We name this in our social principles. We embrace this in our social teachings. That what is making for peace is our budgets that are to be moral documents. However, our reality today in the US and across the world is far from peaceful. In the US, we have surpassed over 146 mass shootings this year. And according to the United Nations, worldwide, over 100 million people have been displaced from their homes because of conflict, violence, human rights violations, and persecution. And we are feeling the impacts of economic inflation within our homes and communities in the US and around the world. Our reality as people of faith is more of conflict than of peace. But how can we move towards peace? What actions can we take within ourselves, within our social and political communities to move towards that which is life-giving and life-sustaining? So today I am grateful to welcome and be in conversation with my colleague, Holly Metcalf. Come on with me, the Director of Peace with Justice, to talk about legislative actions that can lead to peaceful visions for our communities in the US and abroad, and how we, as people of faith, United Methodist, can engage. Welcome, Holly. Thanks for joining this Wednesday Witness today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, yes. So can you share more about your issue area of peace with justice and really how you came to this work?
Yeah, sure. So my previous career was mostly working for the State Department. I was a U.S. diplomat for 10 years. I worked mostly in the Middle East and Europe. I worked on issues related to human rights, religious freedom, the refugee crisis in Greece in 2019, and also U.S. government relations with the Eastern Orthodox Church and other religious institutions. So I come to this work with a background in international affairs, working on a lot of peace-building efforts from the government side, and then combining that with my seminary studies, with my theological understanding, to inform the work that I do here on behalf of the United Methodist Church. So those are kind of the two lenses that I bring to this work, the international affairs piece and then the theology piece.
So grateful for your expertise, for your experience, and how you are able to really bring the two together to shape really what we are called to do as a church when it comes to peace with justice. So within that, what are the life-giving and life-sustaining priorities that both congressional and world leaders can be investing in to make for peace instead of conflict?
Yeah, as you might imagine, that's a big question. So what we know and what has been proven time and time again is that when we see violence in this world, it is most often related to conflict for resources or a desire to feel safe or concern about not having your needs or well-being met. And so time and time again, we have learned, there are studies that show that all of the things that make for a stable and flourishing life are peace building measures. So the work of peace building is pretty broad, and it can seem daunting at times. So anything that leads to better healthcare, better education, more safety for individuals, more prosperity for different communities, all of that work is peace building work. And so I think anytime we're engaging in that work in our local communities or elsewhere in the world, we need to think of it as contributing to a culture of peace. But I know that sometimes that can seem conceptual and a little difficult maybe to put our hands on and to see the results of. So I want to highlight some specifics that we're working on right now in our office. Yes.
Before you highlight those specifics, I just want to insert, is there a working definition because of your experience that you would offer around what is peace building? How would you just define that in your own words?
Yeah. Again, I come back to this idea of creating stability and the conditions for flourishing life, because the goal is to avoid conflict or to avoid escalation of conflict. And, we see time and time again where on the surface, the conflict may look like perhaps it's a religious conflict or perhaps it's a disagreement about something else. But when you really drill down into the issues, it is so often about securing a future for your children or concern about access to resources or a feeling that you might be unsafe if you allowed this issue to persist. And so peace building for me is about creating those conditions that allow people to feel safe and like their well-being is protected.
Thank you. I think that's so helpful for us. As people of faith in our communities, this understanding of peace that is not just the opposite of conflict, but it is in relationship to safety. It is in relationship to, violence not existing. And how do we work towards that? So thank you for inviting us into that vision. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the ways we're working on this right now, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of this in practical terms can often come down to how we spend our money, right? Budgets reflect the priorities that we have. Budgets are what get turned into actions that then go out into the world and create these conditions. And so one of the initiatives we're working on right now in the office is support for the People Over Pentagon bill that's in the House. We are supporting this bill because we believe that alarming portions of US resources are devoted to military spending. Our United Methodist social principles say that war is incompatible with the teachings and example of Christ, and that human values should outweigh military claims when we're determining our priorities. I know that sometimes those statements for folks are maybe a little idealistic. I know some Methodists that are not fully pacifist that believe that sometimes in a practical world, it can be really tough not to fund a military. Within that range of thinking, which I know a lot of people share, I would point out that the US Congress continues to increase the US defense budget. Every year since 2015, the US Congress has increased the defense budget. And in fact, in the past 3 years, since 2021, it's been increased over $152 billion in 3 years. So this proposal, the People Over Pentagon budget, is the People Over Pentagon bill related to the US budget, is proposing cutting $100 billion off the top line discretionary spending of the US defense budget. That's not a random number. They didn't choose that number just because it's a round number. It comes from a report that was done by the Congressional Budget Office in 2021 that found that $100 billion could be cut from the Pentagon budget without impacting US security, without touching troop pay at all, and without affecting any health benefits for US veterans or US service members. That $100 billion was suggested by the Congressional Budget Office in 2021, and we've now increased the budget $152 billion beyond when they made that assessment. And so that's one of the reasons that we feel like this is an initiative that is well within our theological foundations, that is well within practical steps that we can take to reorient the US budget more towards supporting life as opposed to military means and war. The other piece I'd like to point out on this is that over 50% of the US defense budget does not go to troops, does not go to ongoing military operations. It goes to private companies, private for-profit companies that manufacture weapons. And so one of the ways that I think we can think about this is in a context of, are we supporting initiatives that are related to grace, as we understand it as United Methodists, or are we supporting initiatives related to greed? Are we supporting the flourishing of life, or are we supporting profits for companies? And so as we're looking at these congressional budgeting measures that are going to be happening over the next few months here in Washington, I would just encourage United Methodists to keep thinking about grace versus greed. Is this something that helps people to flourish, or is this something that is producing profit for a company that may not be thinking theologically or morally about that issue?
Wow, Holly, thank you so much for framing it that way and also giving us a visual to the way that the defense budget is right now. I think it's really hard for us to conceptualize often what happens within the context of Capitol Hill, and to know that, that money is not going to, as I think Ken had asked this question, would this affect military assistance in Ukraine? That's not even what we're talking about, right?
No, so I should add, the military assistance that we've given to Ukraine has been done through supplemental bills. So this is not even including the assistance that has gone to Ukraine. This is the baseline annual US defense budget.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So there is this question of truly, this is a decision of greed, if we could even frame it like that, right? Like there was a report done. And so, having that perspective, that analysis, even understanding the congressional report of $100 million, and then the budget was increased.
$100 billion.
$100 billion. Thank you
Yes.
for correcting me. I think that does bring us to task as people of faith who can use our voices to create change, that we need to be choosing grace. We need to be choosing flourishing. So thank you. Thank you for naming that for us.
I should also mention, because we're talking a lot in the US context. And I think it's also important that we think about how we can support peace building internationally. So I would mention that internationally, we also support multilateral organizations like the UN and all of the UN affiliated agencies. The UN is really the best option we have right now for resolving international disputes and maintaining peace internationally. And so strengthening those organizations, continuing to strengthen the mechanisms that they have for ending conflict, for maintaining peace building operations, for negotiating and enforcing treaties related to disarmament. All of that work is also very important. And it's work that our office does up at the UN, but it's also work that I would encourage United Methodists to continue to think about, to support, and to understand why support for those organizations is based in our belief about peace and the importance of peace building and the world that we're trying to create.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for naming that. Well, in the same relationship of advocating for peace with justice, there is the reality of gun violence within the context of the US, as well as the global reality of violence. And I know that you are constantly advocating with grassroots leaders on the ground around gun violence prevention. So I invite and want you to speak to that, as well as how that is a part of your work.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. As you've named, gun violence is a particular problem in the US. I also want to talk about how our laws in the US affect us globally. But I like to highlight, when we're talking about this issue, the passage from Micah 4 that talks about turning swords into plowshares, because I think it's helpful to remember that this is not work that God is going to do alone, right? This is work that we are called into. There is human effort involved in partnering with God in taking these weapons and turning it into something else. And so, yes, as you've named, we have a real problem with gun violence in America. As you mentioned earlier, we've had a number of mass shootings this year. Statistically, 321 people are shot in America every day, which is just a tremendous number, 321 people a day. More than half of the people who die from gun violence in America die from suicide. And so these are individuals that had access to a weapon and chose to take their own life. And so access to weapons is a real problem in this context. We also see, as everyone saw over the weekend, incidents of folks being shot in everyday violence, in one-off incidents that are not included in these mass shooting statistics. We see a large number of shootings that are taking place on school property, and the most common place on school property for these shootings to take place now is at sporting events. We're seeing an increase of shootings at sporting events. And so all of this, I say, just to highlight the importance of this problem, that this is a real present issue confronting us in America today. And I think it is something on which our scriptures are clear. I think our Methodist theology is clear. And yet it is an issue that's become very divisive in our society. And so I think it's a real opportunity for people of faith to stand up and to speak on this issue, and to speak about how we need to enact some common sense gun laws in this country that prevent access to these weapons. Again, I want to come back to this idea of grace over greed, right? These weapons are making money for companies. These companies have a financial investment in finding loopholes in the laws, in remaking new weapons that just barely get around whatever legislation has just been passed. They make money off of perpetuating this culture of fear that makes people want to own more and more weapons and collect more and more weapons. And so I encourage folks, again, to think about what it would look like to live in a world where you didn't have to fear getting shot walking down the street, where you didn't have to fear whether the large event that you're going to might be a site of a mass shooting, where your children didn't come home from school after having practiced shooter drills. And so I think we really need to reimagine what could be possible, and continue to stand up and make our voices heard as people of faith on this issue. So a couple things we're working on right now with that. First of all, we have a general action alert on our website, which I'm sure we'll share in the chat, that outlines our United Methodist resolutions and position on gun violence in general, on gun violence prevention. Also specifically, the one issue that is getting the most traction here in Washington currently is the assault weapons ban. The president has made it clear that he wants to see it passed, that if it comes to his desk, he will sign it, that he expects folks in Congress to be working on this. We're seeing a lot of movement from grassroots activists. And so we have also been engaging heavily to get the assault weapons ban passed. One other thing I should mention, I alluded to it a little bit before. The US is also the largest exporter of small arms, meaning that most of the guns worldwide are manufactured in this country. So whatever we allow to be manufactured here impacts the type of violence that people see all around the world. So 70% of the guns used in crimes in Mexico came from the United States. 50% of the guns used in crimes in Costa Rica or Belize or El Salvador came from the United States. So these decisions don't just impact us here at home, but they affect what weapons are available worldwide, and what violence we see worldwide.
Wow. Holly, thank you for naming the connections and also inviting us to task as people of faith. So this is the Wednesday witness. Holly, you have named and shared your own witness of what brought you to this work and what continues your work as the Director of Peace with Justice here. But now each of you are called to live your faith witness in your communities and really advocating for peace with justice in whatever way is possible for you. So we want to offer you a couple of first steps, next steps that you can take. So if you're looking for a place to start talking about the realities of peace, specifically when it's related to gun violence, a good place to start is our 4-week Kingdom Dreams and Violent Realities Bible study. It's available on our website as well as our store. It's a 4-week. It was written by our staff a couple years ago with an introduction from Bishop Sally Dick, and it's a great conversation starter and also provides a theological framework that Holly, that you have offered to us today, that's really helpful for congregations that are really wanting to figure out, how do we talk about this within our church? How do we advocate for this as people of faith? So definitely to start there. And as Holly has already named, our 2 action alerts, advocating to address the defense funding in a way that leads to flourishing, not agreed, as well as in terms of gun violence prevention and the assault. I want to make sure I'm getting this, the 118th Congress, HR 698 and Senate Bill 25 to pass the assault weapons ban. Those are the 2 action alerts that are available on our website. Holly, I don't know if you want to say anything about those other than what you've named already.
I think that's it. I'll just put in another plug for the 4-week study. I have heard from several congregations that felt that the issue of gun violence was contentious and that maybe they would have a hard time talking about guns in their context. Several people have come back to me and said that study was actually a great entry point for them. So if you are laity or clergy that's worried about bringing this issue up and how to open that conversation, that can be a great resource.
Thank you. Thank you for that invitation and reminder. So in addition to the kingdom, in addition to those that Bible study, I want to also affirm our civic engagement toolkit that provides you with so many different advocacy tactics. So once you click and reach out to your members of Congress through those 2 action alerts that Holly created, you can follow up with the civic engagement toolkit, write a letter to your editor about the realities of how the defense budget as well as gun violence is impacting you and your own communities, and how do you name that in your own words. If you wanted to do a public vigil, all of those resources are in the civic engagement toolkit, and there's a step-by-step way to show you how to do that. If you want further conversation and practice, the Wednesday Witness also has a skill building series. Our next session is on May 3rd, and we're going to be talking about advocating through in-person visits with your decision makers. So if you're like, I want to speak with my member of Congress or my local decision maker on this issue, how do I set that up and what do I need to say? And you want a step-by-step explanation of how to do that, join me May 3rd for that conversation and practice. So really looking forward to that. And then lastly, Holly, you can definitely speak to this as well. So if you are ready to kind of take another step and you're not United Methodist mobilizing nationwide to address gun violence in your community, there is a United Methodist gun violence prevention working group. And you can email Holly about more of that. Holly,
Yes.
Did you want to talk about that at all?
So my email address, which I hope we can drop in the chat, is hmetcalf@umcjustice.org. I meet monthly with a group of laity and clergy in the United Methodist Church who are just interested in this issue and have been working on it from different angles. It's a pretty diverse group as far as how they came to this work and what they're interested in. There's a lot of good work to be done, but I think folks who join those calls have found it to be helpful to be connected to one another, to hear ideas from one another, and to stay in touch as far as what's happening nationally on this issue. So if you are interested in joining our monthly gun violence prevention calls, please send me an email and I can get you looped in there.
Thank you. Thank you. And then lastly, something that is coming up real quick, it's next week, is the Ecumenical Advocacy Days. These are advocacy days that we support as Church and Society as an ecumenical opportunity to lobby on the Hill. Most of Capitol Hill visits are still happening online. And so it is a great way, if you haven't had an in-person visit with your member of Congress, to sign up and participate in. So that should be dropped in the chat. Thank you. Shout out to James, our senior communication specialist, for doing all the tech stuff and dropping links in the chat. Really, really grateful for you. So Ecumenical Advocacy Days, it is April 25th through the 27th. It is a virtual conference worship to educate and advocate for innovative and courageous policies. And this year's focus is on peace. So very aligned with our conversation today. The theme is Swords into Plowshares, Achieving Enough for All and Pursuing Peace. And if you register, there will also be a United Methodist denominational time on Tuesday, April 25th from 12:30 to 1:45 p.m., where we will just continue to really share and dig in about how we are addressing peace, both within the US and around the world. So I really encourage you all to get creative and to be intentional about how you want to communicate your visions and actions for peace by sharing your story and your witness for justice with your decision makers. Again, thank you, Holly, for your time, for your expertise, for your witness. So grateful for you. And I think we have a few questions, so we can open it up for that. I'm gonna kind of scroll back up. So I saw a couple of questions, and James, if there's any questions on Facebook, please let me know. Okay. One question I did come across, Holly, if you want to name, about Peace with Justice Sunday. Yeah, Ken brought that up.
So Peace with Justice Sunday is definitely in June, and I'm forgetting the actual date off the top of my head. I wonder if someone in the chat knows. I will say it does not always have to be celebrated on the designated day. Your church is welcome to do it anytime you'd like to, but it is one of the special Sundays in the United Methodist Church. And the offerings that are collected on that day, half of them stay in your annual conference for Peace with Justice work locally, and the other half contribute to grants that are given out, global grants that are given out by GBCS every year.
Thank you, Holly. And this is a space of collective wisdom. We have incredible Peace with Justice and Church and Society coordinators on the call. Share your wisdom. And with that, I think there's 2 hands raised. I see Judith and Diane. Judith, you're the first hand that I saw. I'm not really sure how. Are you able to come off mute and share your question? Judith, can you hear us? If you're talking, we can't hear you. Okay. So Judith, for the sake of time, I'm going to invite you to drop your question in the chat, and I'm going to pass it to Peace with Justice Coordinator, Diane Dixon Proctor. You're welcome to come off mute if you're able.
Am I unmuted?
You are. Welcome.
Oh, wow. Great. Peace and Justice Sunday is June the 4th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Thank you, Diane. Thank you. Didn't know if you had another question. Okay. All right. All right. I see one more question from Judith Borato. Did you want to come off mute if you're able to?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Welcome.
I just want to give a shout out to whoever does the resources for peace and justice. In addition to the envelopes that we are putting out, we're putting up flyers, and we're using a couple of the short videos during our pre-worship times.
That's excellent news.
Yeah,
so I'll have to pass on your feedback. The printed materials are made by UMCOM, our communications folks, so I'll make sure they hear the good feedback. And the videos that you're referencing are probably on our YouTube site, which has several short videos that you can show. One is specifically for Peace with Justice Sunday, if you're looking for something to use in your congregation.
Thank you. And then I think Judith, the other Judith, posted a question. Peace comes from representation in government, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that is done to strengthen democracy can help with peace building efforts, which can include representation in government. It can include election security, election validation, all of that. Anything that we do that creates stability and safety for folks is going to help to build peace. And so I think, again, I would encourage folks to think of this very broadly, and to continue doing the good work that they're doing. I think each of us is called to a particular piece of this work. And if we all keep doing the piece that we are called to, that is how we end up with flourishing.
Oh, that is such a powerful way to end. That is such a powerful way to end. Thank you so much, Holly, for your time. Thank you to everyone for joining us again. This will be recorded and available for later viewing a little bit later today. And for those with other questions, please again email us at gbcs@umcjustice.org, and we'll be in conversation with you later. And join us for the next Wednesday Witness skill building on May 3rd. Thank you all for your time and have a great rest of your day. Bye.